What's good, Toronto Raptors fans? A long time ago, I said one of my biggest gripes with the NBA was that a lot of people who follow the NBA don't understand the math of basketball. And I think that math is a very, very important thing when we're talking about tanks and tanking odds. And right now, the prevailing conversation, one of the most dominant conversations around Toronto Raptor land, is the Raptors have screwed up their odds at Cooper Flagg. Every single win is met with this sort of repetitive, mundane, ill-informed conversation around, uh-oh, here go the odds. So I think right now we got to talk about what the Raptors are actually trying to do, because I want to hit on a few points in this live. And if you stick with us to the end, I think you're going to have some new facts, some new data points, some new talking points, some fresh takes. And hopefully the next time you're at the water cooler at your office and you're like, what do you think the Raptors should do? Should they tank for Cooper Flag? You will become the most hated person in your office when you say, that's not possible. You can't tank for Cooper Flag. Last night, as these things often go, I found the inspiration to do some digging into the math. I was having some trouble sleeping. Some people count sheep, I count draft picks. So that's what I did. Okay, so here we go. I want to read out a few posts. Those of you who follow us on X/Twitter, this is going to be a little bit repetitive for you, but some of our followers have switched over to Blue Sky, and since I'm a little bit lazy about posting on both ends, hopefully this will be a little bit of new information for you. And I do want to talk about the prevailing sort of takeaways from that. Okay, the Toronto Raptors, sorry, the team that won the number one pick the last 6 years, which is Minnesota, Detroit, San Antonio, Orlando, Atlanta, New Orleans, has averaged 25.3 wins. Okay, the Raptors coming into this season, right? Coming into this season, had an over-under of 30.5. They're going to be firmly under that. So the fact that they were very far under and number two was largely due to health, and also due to a weird process of offense in which I believe that the Raptors deliberately sort of went away from their strengths, played sort of dysfunctional lineups. I got news for you. They're still doing that. They're just winning now. I mean, it's not like they went out and traded a couple first round picks or 3 picks for Jakob Poeltl again. It's not like they swapped out a first for a second for Thaddeus Young and, sought reinforcements. No, they actually waived a pretty productive player in Bruno Fernando and decided, no, 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 we're going to start guards at forward, and Davion Mitchell is going to consistently get minutes, even though he's been kind of bleeding his minutes. And we're just going to try to win that way. And you're still starting Grady, you're still starting RJ together. You haven't moved away from that and said, okay, screw this whole thing. You're still doing everything that you sought out to do. The only difference is right now you're playing worse teams. You're playing worse teams, and they're playing poorly, and you're winning. So unless you're suggesting that the Raptors like fake injuries and try throwing games, I think you need to take a longer look at what that does for your cultural implications, what that does when you go to a Jakob Poeltl and say, we need you to sit this one out because we want Orlando Robinson to play 35 minutes. And I got news for you. Orlando Robinson's all right. You're probably not going to lose last night's game, but I hear you. I hear you. We were second. Now we're third. Oh my God, what's going on here? But I do want to make sure that you understand that the math on this is pretty firm. The average team that has won, that has been the worst team in the league, the team that has won the number one pick. Okay, that includes all of those teams, including the good ones and the really bad ones. Some of them had 19 wins, some had 20, some had 33. It averages out to 25.3. You currently have 22.4. You're all right. So granted, they're probably on pace for win more when you factor in the fact that they're healthier. Okay, fine. Softer schedule, etc. But please don't completely wash away the fact that this team has routinely, actually the last year, Tampa Tank completely torn it down towards the end. This is not a team that has a problem tanking in April. This has always been a team that has a problem tanking in January. They've never done it. And the same people who are running the last ship are running this ship. So that's the first thing I really want y'all to understand is all hope is not lost because you're not as bad as the Washington Wizards. Okay. Now I want to share with you the math of tanking for Cooper Flagg. Okay. I'm going to read this out because I don't want to fluff this up too much. So just going to apologize in advance. I'm going to try to read this as charismatically as humanly possible. Here's the math of tanking for Cooper Flagg, which is a misnomer since the NBA has basically made it impossible to tank for Cooper Flagg. Let me explain. The flattened lottery odds, which we have discussed ad nauseum on this channel, 14% for all three teams at the top, and then 12.5% for the fourth team. They make getting that first overall pick or tanking for it almost impossible. Not like when the NBA had 25% odds for the worst team. Then it kind of made sense. So when the first pick is drawn, the worst team, which is right now Washington, will have a 0% advantage over the second team and the third team, and will have a minimal advantage over the fourth team. That means there are 1,000 balls, and 140 of them say Washington. Right now, 140 of them say Toronto. 140 of them will say Utah or New Orleans. I don't know who. I think it's Utah. Utah's number 2, Toronto's number 3. And then I think, what was it? 125, right? 125 will say Utah. So you're pretty much dead even odds right now. If you finish bottom 4, it's minimal. Okay. So hope is not lost. Don't freak out yet. Okay. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't freak out yet. All right. All being the worst means is that your range is limited 1 to 5. We've talked about this, right? When you finish with the absolute bottom, the worst you can do is 5. You can never pick worse than 5. But the second worst team will have the same odds that the worst team has, except their odds for the fifth pick and the sixth, the fifth pick are split between 5 and 6. And the same thing happens for team number 3. You can drop a little further, but your odds at the top are just the same. I'm going to explain why this matters right after I read all of this out. Historically speaking, it's worth noting that since the NBA shifted to the flattened odds, which was the Zion draft, the worst team in the NBA has finished third, second, third, fifth, and fifth. Okay? Not a single team that bottomed out was rewarded with a first overall pick. And if you are one of those compulsive gamblers, you're like, damn, that means Washington is due. Washington is due for Cooper Flagg. Okay. Who were the players that these terrible ass teams got for all of their suffering that the fan bases went through? Let me read out these names because it's not an impressive list. RJ Barrett, James Wiseman, both have been traded since, by the way. Jalen Green, Jabari Smith Jr., Asar Thompson, and Ron Holland. Now, here's which teams actually won the draft and where they ranked pre-draft. Last year, 10th team Atlanta won. Then the Spurs won. They were the third team when they got Victor Wembanyama. The Magic, when they got Paolo, they were the second team. The Pistons, when they got Cade, they were the second team. The Timberwolves, when they got Anthony Edwards, they were the third team. And the Pelicans, when they got Zion, moved up from 7 to 1. That means that the average team that wins the lottery is at 4.5. So right now, look at the team that's fourth, which I believe is Utah or New Orleans. And look at the team that's fifth, which I think is Charlotte. One of those teams on average is probably going to win. I mean, that's a really bad way of looking at this, but historically speaking, and six years is a very small sample size, you can still say, but the minute you start saying Washington has the best odds at Cooper Flagg, you have completely missed the plot because that's not true. Right now, Toronto has the same chance at Cooper Flagg as Washington, which is what I need to hammer home. Here's what those teams got for their grand prize: Zachary Risachet, Victor Wembanyama, Paolo Banchero, Cade Cunningham, Anthony Edwards, Zion Williamson. It's a mixed bag. Some people have an issue with me saying mixed bag. I'm sorry, that is a mixed bag. Zion Williamson has never played a playoff game. Anthony Edwards, success. Cade Cunningham just led Detroit to 2 of the worst seasons in franchise history. Paolo Banchero, very good pick. Last night, shot 1 for 8. Okay, fine. Whatever. Terrible night last night. Jury is still out whether he is like a de facto superstar, but some people think he is. Victor Wembanyama, generational prospect, no questions. Zachary Risachet, honestly, I'm not sure I would trade Grady Dick for Zachary Risachet right now, and Grady was the 13th pick. So it is a mixed bag. Also, here's a fun fact. Prior to the NBA draft lottery odds flattening, when teams at the bottom had a 25% chance of picking first, there were a few years where the lottery luck was truly wild, including the one and only time that the Raptors got the first overall pick, in which they, spent it on Andrea Bargnani. There was no consensus number 1 pick that year. They had 8.8% chance that year. They were the 5th team with an 8.8% chance. Okay. The Blazers, when they got Greg Oden, they had 5.3%. Bulls, number one, when they drafted Derrick Rose, future league MVP, 1.7% chance. The Clippers, when they drafted Blake Griffin, that was a 17.7% chance. And the Wizards at fifth, it was a 10.3% chance. The history of random acts of God. Okay. So since 1990, 8 teams have truly beat the odds and won the top selection with less than 6.3% chance. Or specifically, I should say less than 6.31% chance. That would be the Pelicans when they got Zion. I believe it was the Cavaliers when they got Kyrie. The Cavaliers when they got Anthony Bennett. The Cavaliers when they got Kyrie, it was 1.4% chance. With Bennett, they had a good chance. The Clippers, 2.8%. I think that was the Michael Olowokandi year. The Bulls, 1.7%. That was the Derrick Rose year. The Blazers, 5.3%. We already covered that. That was Greg Oden. The Bucks, 6.3%. I think that was Andrew Bogut. The Nets, 4.4%. I think, if I'm not mistaken, was that the Tatum year? I think that was the Tatum year. And I believe that was the year where, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the Tatum year, and then they had to give up their pick, and then Philly had it, and then they traded down to Boston. They gave it to Boston. Boston traded down from 1 to 3, Markelle Fultz, and I think it was that year. And if it wasn't that year, then it was the Kenyon Martin year. And then the Magic when they drafted Chris Webber, 1.52%. Okay, so too long didn't read. You can't tank for Cooper. All you can do is get 140 out of 1,000 balls and pray that the other two teams have 280 balls that don't get him. But you're always at a disadvantage. And I'm going to tell you this right now. For all of their tanking, for all of their terribleness this year for Washington, for all of their losing, their most likely outcome is still the 5th pick. That is their most likely outcome. Okay, so this is what Adam Silver has done, and it works. Okay, it is working better than any system prior to it. Now, I mentioned earlier that tanking does not always work. So again, in 18-19, the Knicks finished with the worst record in the NBA. What was their prize? RJ Barrett? That was the franchise player? No, he wasn't. They traded him. They salary dumped him. The Warriors salary dumped James Wiseman. What has Jalen Green done for the Houston Rockets? He might be their 4th or 5th best player. I think Amen Thompson's better. I think Tari Eason's better. I think Schengen's better. Schengen was the 16th pick in the same goddamn draft. In 2021, 2022, the Rockets somehow thought 2 times was a charm. They were horrible again. They bottomed out again with Jalen Green. And then they got Jabari Smith Jr. Or who did they miss out on? Chet Holmgren? Paolo? I mean, at this point, who would you rather have? Jabari Smith Jr., who was the 3rd pick, or Dyson Daniels, who was the 8th pick? I don't know. In 2023, 2024, the Pistons finished with the worst record both years, and they got Ausar Thompson and Ron Holland. So let me tell you something. Here's my question. Think about those names. Think about the players I just mentioned. Those were the concession prizes for being the worst team in the league. Ausar Thompson, Ron Holland, Jabari Smith Jr., Jalen Green, James Wiseman, RJ Barrett. I want you to think of those 6 players, and I want you to ask yourself this one question. Would the Denver Nuggets trade Jokic for all those players? Would the OKC Thunder trade Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for all of those players combined? Would the Spurs trade Wemby? Would the Mavs trade Luka? Would the Raptors trade Scottie for all 6 of those players? Honestly, be honest with yourself. Do you really think that the Raptors value what those 6 players provide more than they value Scottie Barnes? I don't think the Raptors would trade all 6 of those players for Scottie. Some of you might. Some of you may really be high on Ausar and Jalen Green. And you say, shoot, let's just take the poo-poo platter. Some of you think RJ Barrett is better. But really, most teams would not trade a franchise starter, like a real franchise player. You can disagree if Scottie is that for you. I don't think the Magic would trade Paolo for all 6 of these players combined. I got news for you. The Magic ended up hitting more on their 8th pick in 2021 than their 4th pick. Franz Wagner is worth much more than Jalen Suggs. And I love Jalen Suggs now, but that's the truth. So the 3 takeaways here are: draft lotteries are unpredictable, drafting is inexact, and value is found everywhere in the draft. So are franchise talents, okay? Because franchise players have been picked 15th, 11th, 13th. They've been picked all over. Go look. When we have a debate about the best shooting guards in the league, you know who we're debating? We are debating a 1st overall pick in Anthony Edwards, a 13th overall pick in Donovan Mitchell, and a 13th overall pick in Devin Booker. Those are the 3 names. They're all lottery picks, sure. When we talk about the greatest small forwards of all time, who are we debating? How many 1st overall picks are there? We're debating Kawhi Leonard, 15th overall pick in the NBA, at least right now. We're debating Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's a 15th overall pick. You get my point. Value is found everywhere. Now I'm going to tell you why I think the Raptors are doing what they're doing right now. Now, I'll apologize in advance. This was not clickbait. The Raptors' plan isn't Cooper Flagg, is not meant to be clickbait. The Raptors will be thrilled to get Cooper Flagg. Cooper fits beautifully next to Scotty. He would be a franchise-altering talent. I don't know if he's a generational talent, but he's a generational defensive prospect, and he's a great defensive prospect. The Raptors would be happy to get Cooper Flagg, but they're not going to bet everything on it. They're not going to, because the Raptors, unlike the casuals at the Tom Toms and the people at the water cooler and your best friend, they've actually run the numbers on this and they realize there's no way to ensure this. So the Raptors have done their own due diligence and they're looking at this draft a little bit differently than you might be. See, the truth is that most people have really bought into this hype. I'm going to call it hype because that's really what it is. They bought into the hype that you got to draft really high to get a good player. And that's just not true. You got to scout well, develop well to get a good player. And you got to scout the right draft at the right time and then develop the right player for your system to get a good player. I'm not saying draft fit over player. No, talent always wins out. But you and I may have a very different understanding of what this draft actually has to offer and what 2026 has to offer. We may have a completely flipped opinion about how valuable the second pick is in this draft relative to the 8th pick or 9th pick, because some people think that this draft is about 2 players and then there is a major drop off. Some people have bought into this draft being more top 5, top 6. Now, I don't know how high you are on Kaman Malawach. I have no idea. I don't know how high you are on Trey. I don't know how high you are on VJ Edgecombe, but maybe the Raptors don't really see it the way that you see it. Maybe the Raptors don't see this as a 3-player draft or a 4-player draft. Maybe they see it as Cooper, Dylan, or bust. And maybe bust means there's a group of like 8 players and they don't think there's a huge differentiation between them. When the Raptors drafted Grady Dick, I wonder if they kind of thought the same way. If Cason Wallace or Derek Lively fall to us, we're perfectly fine with it. If Bilal Coulibaly falls to us, we're perfectly fine with it. We're perfectly fine with Jarris Walker or Taylor Hendricks. We're perfectly fine in this group of players, right? And I'm pretty sure, given, what they've prioritized under Darko, that they would have drafted Derek Lively if he was there. I'm pretty sure they would have loved Cason Wallace if he was there. I mean, they've got after guys like Quickly, Ulrich, like Jakob. Like, I mean, there's a certain type of player that really makes a lot of sense for the Raptors. How do we know that player isn't Yegor Demet, whose stock has slipped tremendously? How do we know that player isn't Derek Queen? How do we know that? There are players like Colin Murray Boyles, Rocco Zakarski, who is injured right now, who's fallen off, Xavier Lee, who could be available right towards the tail end or maybe even undrafted, Kasparis Yakuchonis, who is currently injured, Kaman Malawach, right? Ben Saraf, right? Tomislav Ivicic, McKenzie, like Dink Pate, Nolan Traore, who's, and we're talking also next year. I mean, because obviously in 2022, the Raptors were aware of what the 2026 draft was bringing up. They're a good organization. They're a smart organization, and they do their due diligence. So if they see Colin Murray Boyles as their can't miss, if they think there's something we see in Colin Murray Boyles, the same way there's something they saw in Jacoby Walter and Jonathan Mobo and, Jamison Battle and Ulrich that nobody else really saw, because let's be honest, if other people could see the way the Raptors could see, Pascal doesn't go to 27, OG doesn't go to 23, these players just don't fall. But the Raptors have a unique vision and a unique way of evaluating prospects. And so that often means that they're going to be really good at identifying gems. And I think that this draft might be a little flatter than you think. Somewhere around pick 4 to about pick 12, I have flip-flopped on these prospects a lot, to the point where, let me give it to you like this. There are some drafts where I'm just gonna put a number next to these players, and I want to explain what I mean. Let's say there's a draft like 2003, right, where it's basically you're gonna get LeBron, let's say 100, Carmelo Anthony 95, Darko Milicic. Please ignore what happened afterwards, but 95. Let's say he's 95, 96. Chris Bosh, 92. Dwayne Wade, 85. Kirk Heinrich, 82. And then there's like this massive fall off right after Kirk Heinrich and TJ Ford. TJ Ford was actually projected to go a little bit higher in that draft. He slipped to 8 because of, concerns over size. In that draft, being top 6, top 7 was very important. But what about the draft where, you identified a player like Giannis at 15 or Kawhi at 15? What about a draft where there's a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at 11 and you project him to be there at 11? It doesn't bother you too much to fall outside of the top 5 because you know that if you fall to 7, you just grab Shai. If you fall to 8, you'll grab Shai. And if you fall to 9, you'll grab Shai. And if you fall to 10, you'll grab Shai, because these teams do a great job identifying which teams are following which players, which teams around us need the same stuff that we do. And I think it bodes pretty well for the Raptors that the other teams that are kind of around you, apart from the obvious, everyone's going to draft Cooper Flagg, maybe don't have the same needs as us. And so it's not the worst thing in the world if the Raptors end up 6th or 7th. I'll also reiterate, the odds of falling when you're at 7 are very low. The odds of falling when you're at 1 are very high. So the higher you are, the more you fall. The lower you are, the less you fall. The Raptors moved up from 5 to 1 when they drafted Andrea Bargnani. They moved down from 3 to 4 when they got Chris Bosh. They moved up from 7 to 4 when they got Scotty Barnes. They've moved up much more than they moved down, is what I'm saying, in these situations. So I think that the Raptors right now, I think their master plan is as follows. I believe that they're willing to compromise and get a couple of wins right now if it means that their assets are viewed more favorably around the NBA. And I think that they want that to happen because I believe that this team has identified maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 to 12 players over the next 2 draft cycles. And I think they want to have assets to get those players. I don't know how much you know about Andre Stojakovic. I don't know how much you know about Dash Daniels. Andre is Paige's son. Dash is actually Dyson Daniels' brother. I don't know how much you know about these players. I don't know how much you've studied Kaman Malawach, for South Sudan this summer or watching him with Duke. But I can tell you that I don't know how much you've watched Derek Queen and what you believe his upside is. But what I'm trying to tell you is this is a team that currently has 5 rookies. 5 rookies. And they're developing. Those are not players you have to keep. They are also developing 2x, 3x lottery picks. 4, 5, 5x lottery picks. RJ Barrett, Ochai Agbaji, Grady Dick, Scotty Barnes. Wait, who am I missing here? Davion Mitchell. That's 5x lottery picks. 3 of whom are second draft guys, 2 of whom are your own lottery picks. This is a phenomenally young team. When you take all of the smoke that has come out from the Raptors' mouthpieces, Michael Grange, Josh Lewenberg, nobody is untouchable except for Scotty. The Raptors are looking to pair a franchise-level star or a real significant piece next to Scotty. Then what the Raptors really are doing is asset farming. That's what they want. They want to develop and move, develop and move, develop and move. The problem when you don't develop is you have nothing to move. The Raptors under Masai Ujiri have been a bit of an oxymoron or a bit of a conundrum, if you will, because you have this team with this beautiful scouting department that is so good at identifying prospects, and yet consistently they have operated at a draft pick deficit. I'll remind you, this is the team that traded a first-round pick before Masai Ujiri got here, which turned into a lottery pick for Kyle Lowry. Good deal by Brian Colangelo. Kyle Lowry was definitely worth it, franchise legend, but nevertheless, this is a team that has a habit of moving off of first-round picks. They moved off of a first-round pick to clean up the mess that they made with the DeMarre Carroll contract. True or not true? They moved off of a first-round pick to get Kawhi. They moved off of a first-round pick to get Serge. They moved off of a first-round pick to get Marc Gasol. Again, opportunity cost. You don't know what those first-round picks could have been. You don't know what they would have been. You don't know if you don't trade for Kyle Lowry that you didn't draft Giannis Antetokounmpo that year. You have no idea. You'll never know. I'll never know. But there's a lot of what ifs that have been left on the table. The Raptors move a first round pick to get Jakob Poeltl, which they just surrendered as a lottery pick. They moved a first round pick that potentially could have turned into Walker Kessler, Peyton Watson, Christian Brown for Thaddeus fucking Young. Okay, this is a team that under Masai Ujiri, for the most part, has operated with the assumption that draft picks are replaceable. They have never, ever prioritized draft picks as much as the fan base, ever. When we as fans hear the Raptors are trading a first round pick, I can hear the shrieks because they traded a first round pick literally last year for Kelly Olynyk. I mean, let's throw that in there. It wasn't a very good first round pick. Maybe you could say you could feel better about it and say they traded it for Ochai Agbaji. Ochai Agbaji didn't have a lot of value. They traded a first round pick for that. All firsts are not created equal. The Raptors ended up with 4 draft picks and a really good undrafted signing guy. And oh, by the way, the other undrafted guy that they signed, which is Brandon Carlson, he's currently playing. They just know how to scout. This is a team that has figured it out. They figured out development, they figured out scouting, and I have a feeling that this team would not mind adding 5, 6, maybe 7 young players. It's also worth noting right now, they have 5 draft picks over the next 2 years. That's their own right now. That's their most valuable draft pick. They have their 2026 own, which is their second most valuable draft pick. The third most valuable draft pick is the 2026 top 4 protected Indiana pick. Their fourth most important or valuable draft pick is their 2025 second round pick from Portland, which is projecting probably a little bit closer to 38, 39 as opposed to 32, 33, like we were hoping, because Portland has been somewhat good this year, and their 2026 own second round pick. I think that between Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, Jakob Poeltl, Davion Mitchell, I think this team wants to add at least 2 to 3 more picks in the next 2 draft cycles. Now, does that mean they want to add 8 draft picks? No. What that means is I believe they are very high on these next 2 drafts. I think they have targets that they believe could be available. And I believe they want draft equity in place either for one of 2 reasons. 3 reasons, actually. Number 1, to use the picks on the players that they're targeting. Number 2, to use the picks to package to trade for the player they're targeting, i.e., you end up with pick, let's just say the Indiana. Indiana's been a good team this year relatively. Let's just say, for instance, 2026. Let's say you end up trading Kelly Olynyk and you get a future 2026 pick. That pick ends up being the 15th pick. Your Indiana Pacers pick ends up being 20th. Let's say your target is at 12. Now you have the ability to package 15 and 20 for 12. Something you could not have done if you had not acquired that second pick. I think the Raptors have targets. Now, at some point, you're going to have to start winning. Teams that start winning tend to try to add veterans. So I think the Raptors are going to take this year, maybe a year and a half, to stockpile assets that are young, movable, serviceable. I think they're going to try to make them better, and I think they're going to try to ship them off. I don't know if this is the plan for Grady necessarily. Maybe Grady's part of the long-term plan, but this is definitely the plan for guys like Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Jameson Battle, Jonathan Mobo, maybe, Jacoby Walter. I don't know. You're getting attached to these players. Don't get too attached. Support them for sure. But understand the grander vision of this team is to take things that are undervalued, develop them, and flip them. The Raptors are house flipping right now. I think they are house flipping. That's how I believe this front office is approaching the trade deadline. I think that's how they're going to approach the 2025 draft. I think that's how they're going to approach the 2026 draft. And I genuinely think that the Raptors are going to reap the benefits of this, because again, you might think Cooper Flagg or bust. The Washington Wizards might think Cooper Flagg or bust. The Sixers themselves right now might be thinking Cooper Flagg or bust. I don't think the Raptors are thinking Cooper Flagg or bust at all. I think the Raptors are thinking Cooper Flagg, nice to have, but if we don't get it, and there's no way to assure it, then we need to focus on something we can actually control. You know what you can control? You can control your flexibility. The Raptors have an unprecedented amount of flexibility right now. They have young, movable pieces. They have sweeteners galore. They have a surplus of draft picks for the first time ever in Masai Ujiri's tenure. And granted, I think they want to stockpile it and build it up a little bit more. They have expiring contracts attached to actually serviceable players. It's different when those players are not serviceable. Bruce Brown and Kelly Olynyk have shown themselves to be very serviceable. Granted, Kelly is not an expiring, but he's a really, really short-term deal on a pretty reasonable contract that can be easily moved for the mid-level. There's a team out there that can trade their mid-level exception if they're below the cap, like a team like Detroit. They have significant room under the trade, the luxury tax line. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Detroit can trade their mid-level exception for Kelly Olynyk and add a pick. I think they can do that, if I'm not mistaken. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, right? Jakob Poeltl. You may see Jakob Poeltl as, oh my God, I can't believe we gave up 2 really high second-round picks and a lottery pick for this dude. Yes, it's a trade that will go down in hindsight as one of the worst moves in Raptors history. But do you think right now that you couldn't redeem a pretty decent first for Jakob Poeltl? You can. And he has provided a tremendous amount of value that you're not going to really see show up on the box score or show up necessarily, but he's a pretty reasonably priced contract at this point. It's the same thing with Emmanuel Quickley. You develop Emmanuel Quickley into a starting point guard. He is suddenly a very different asset than the one you traded for. If you develop RJ Barrett at the age of 24, 25 into a competent two-way wing who can easily, score 22, 23 points per game, there's a team out there that has a contract that they're willing to dump onto you and add pick equity to get back a young talent like RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett still has believers around this league. So the Raptors are not a big market team when it comes to free agents. So the free agency route is not ever really until something significantly changes and the Raptors are a contender year over year, or global warming really hits, or maybe, I don't know, Canada does become the 51st state. No, they won't become the 51st state. I'm just joking. I'm sorry. But until that happens, you're not going to be able to build through free agency. Most likely what you're going to do is you're going to build through trades and you're going to build through the draft. And I think that the Raptors are in a good position to do that. Anyways, let me know what you think about this. Are you still upset after hearing all of this? The Raptors are losing games. Are you willing to be a little bit more patient and kind of let the cards play how they're going to play? Because I'll tell you right now, let's say you do start losing games right now. Let's just say you start like throwing games and you shut everybody down and you try to, just rig it, right? You'll realize very quickly the best you can do is not rig it. You'll never have favorable odds at Cooper Flagg. There's no such thing. So let's say, for instance, a little bit of what ifism. Let's say the team that's 7th, like the Portland Trailblazers, who ethically, tanked. Let's say they win the draft and they win Cooper Flagg. Now you might be saying, shit, I wish we were the 7th pick. We would have gotten Cooper Flagg. Maybe we would have gotten him, right? If we had flipped their balls for our balls, we would have gotten Cooper Flagg. And what if the Portland Trailblazers aren't the only team to jump us? Let's say we bottom out to 3rd and 4 teams jump us from the bottom, because it can so easily happen. I'm not saying it's likely to happen. It's never likely to happen, but it can happen. It's totally within the realm of possibilities. And now you actually go from 3rd to 7th, and the team that's 7th picks 1st. Now what? That's what I'm saying. The NBA has greatly disincentivized tanking. So you need to adjust. This is not Sam Hinkie days. They did it just for that. Basically, they made it so that no general manager could step in front of their fans and say, I'm a loser and I'm trying to put together the biggest loser in the world so that we can win big through the draft. All that tanking resulted in what? 0 NBA finals, 0 Eastern Conference finals. All that tanking for Detroit has resulted in what? Do you want to know? Do you want to see the Detroit Pistons entire? Hang on one second. And I don't want you to think based on this that I'm anti-tank or anything like that. I don't want you to think that I'm suddenly suggesting like the Raptors should try to be competitive and try to win every single game. No, I'm saying just keep doing what you're doing. But I just want to show you very briefly what the Detroit Pistons last few years have looked like. I just want you to see what this process is. This, and we'll take a look at this Sacramento Kings. This right here. This is the fruit of all the success. 23-21, a record you, as a spoiled Raptor fan, probably would have considered a massive underachievement just 4 years ago. But here's the pain that the Pistons went through. I want to show you this. Okay, this is 2016, 2017. Think about how old you were in 2016. Maybe that'll make it real for you. Okay. 37 wins, 39 wins, 40 wins, 20 wins, 20 wins, 23 wins, 17 wins, 14 wins. And you know what the end result of all of this losing was? They're in the play-in right now. They're in the play-in right now. My God. Take a look at the Sacramento Kings. Miss me with all this bullshit. Take a look at we'll take a look at the Wizards too. I'll show you show you their process as well. This is the aforementioned 16 years of losing. 33 wins, 38 wins, 17 wins, 25, 24, 22, 28, 28, 29, 33, 32, 33, 37, 39, 31, 31, 30. Oh my God. Okay. That is terrible. You want to look at the Sixers process that brought them, that brought them Joel Embiid and got them to, get Kawhi. Okay, this is the process Sixers. So this was life after Allen Iverson. They started being super bad in 2013. Again, think about how old you were in 2013. They won 19 games, 18 games, 10 games, 28 games. 4 years. 4 years of some of the most, actually, the 2 years prior to that were let's start in 2009, 2010. That's even better. From 2009 till 2017, the Sixers never finished with a record better than 500. They had 2 playoff berths during that period. One was a lockout. Actually, they did finish better than 500 in a lockout shortened season 2011, 2012. I apologize. Under Doug Collins. So they had, they got to the Eastern Conference semis. I'd completely forgotten about that. 2011, 2012. Following that, though, the process, Sixers, 34 wins, 19 wins, 18 wins, 10 wins, 28 wins. That's the Nerlens Noel. That's the Jahlil Okafor, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, etc. 5 years of pain. Some of you can literally you can't get through 40 games of pain. You got Will Lou crashing out every single night about the Raptors not putting in effort. I mean, my Lord, could you put up with 5 years of this shit? Can we take a moment and just rejoice at how goddamn lucky the Toronto Raptors have been? Take a look at this success, you spoiled brats. Look at this. Masai Ujiri. Okay, forget about pre-Masai. We're going to talk about post-Masai. 2013, 2014, 48 wins, 49 wins, 56 wins, 51 wins, 59 wins, 58 wins, 53 wins. Tampa Tank, 27 wins. Got Scotty Barnes for it. Damn. Are you kidding me? You got 1 year and you got a player better than Ben Simmons and Jahlil Okafor. Okay. The next year, you're in the playoffs. You lose in the first round in a game 6 in which half your team is unhealthy. Okay. I really think the Raptors, a fully healthy Raptors team with Fred VanVleet not nursing a back injury and Scotty Barnes not nursing an ankle, probably could have given that Philly team some work. Then you finish 500, losing the play-in. Then you, of course, have that abysmal season, 25 wins, but you end up with 5 really good young players. I know you gave up your 8th pick. Fine. I don't know who they would have picked with that 8th pick. For all we know, it could have been Jacoby Walter anyway. Maybe they would have picked Matas Buzelis. My point is, you got 5 young players. So all this losing, you got 5 young players. All that losing, you got Scotty Barnes. And all this losing, you're going to end up with a really good young player. And then we will be back. Okay? Capital gains. Rob, you sound delusional coping for these mid-wins. Smart management knows it's worth tanking objectively despite the league changes to the lottery. Capital gains, you need to change your name to capital losses because you don't understand what you're talking about. I'm telling you very frankly, there's no way to tank for Cooper Flagg, which means you're bottoming out and being an 8-win team to try and outcompete with the Wizards is actually going to cost you a lot, because what you seem to be missing is that your assets are not limited to draft picks. Your assets are not limited to draft picks. Okay? They're not. Your players are assets too. These players unfortunately get entangled. Like their their value is unfortunately tangled up with your success and their success on the court. If you want Bruce Brown to play well, and Kelly to play well, and Yak to play well, and Boucher to play well, there's a consequence to that. You're going to worsen your draft pick, but you're boosting their value. You know what the secret genius of all of this is? A lot of teams might do this to boost the value of one guy. The Nets and the Raptors have done a great job of boosting the value of several guys. For the Nets, it's Cameron Johnson plus Cameron Thomas plus Mikal Bridges plus Dennis Schroeder. And now they're probably going to do the same thing with D'Angelo Russell. The Nets get it. Sean Marks is a smart dude. The Raptors are kind of doing the same thing. Every win is not just a positive for Jakob Poeltl. It's not just a positive for Davion Mitchell. It's a positive for all of them. And if you look at last night's advanced box score, I'll tell you right now, you know who any guesses on the 3 leaders for the Toronto Raptors in terms of the advanced box score? And let me just save you some time. If you guess Scotty Barnes or RJ Barrett, you're wrong. It was Kelly Olynyk, Jakob Poeltl, and I'm pretty sure Chris Boucher or Bruce Brown. So basically, the guys that you actually are trying to trade, those are the guys who are really playing well. And teams around the league can notice that. Teams around the league are probably like, damn, if he can do that with Davion Mitchell as a starting point guard and Scotty Barnes struggling to find offense, I wonder what they could do with LeBron and AD. I wonder what they could do with, KD and Book. Kelly Olynyk looks like a really serviceable player right now. Dennis Schroeder looked like a frigging franchise savior when he was with the Nets. It was a pump and dump. Look, I come from the finance world. If there's anything I know, especially, with tech hedge funds, it's pump and dumps, man. I understand pump and dumps very, very well. I understand making something look a little bit too appetizing so people will jump in on it just so you can get out. I completely get that. And that's what the Raptors want to do with these assets. I don't think they're emotionally attached to anybody at this point. People who assume, hey, Masai, is falling in love with these players and he's going to just, no, man. No, they have championships in mind. Championships are built through winning on the margins. Championships are built not just by developing a Jakob Poeltl, it's by capitalizing on Jakob Poeltl and actually trading him when the value is right to get your Marc Gasol. You know what I mean? The Raptors have an eye on the prize. I trust them. Obviously, every one of these losses, it pinches a little bit, but there's a big value to be gained. If the Raptors are still winning seriously after the trade deadline, I will have very different energy. I promise you. I will adjust my tune 100% once February 6th passes. But until I see what these assets net you, I cannot go against this, because I, for one, think that getting an additional 2026 or 2025 first round pick for Kelly, as opposed to getting nothing for Kelly, might be better than 2 more lottery balls or 10 more lottery balls or 20 more lottery balls or one place up in the lottery. I don't think the gap between 3 and 4 is that big. Again, if your goal is a top 5 pick, the Raptors are fucking up royally. If your goal is actually Cooper Flagg or Dylan Harper or bust, if that's how you view this draft, the Raptors are doing fine. The Raptors are doing perfectly fine. There's no way to guarantee getting those guys not being the worst, second worst, third worst, fourth worst. There's no way to do it. None. All you can do is give yourself a chance. So yeah, if the Raptors slip to 10th, I might have some issues. But slipping to 5th, 6th, 7th, 4th, the odds are minimally moved. Minimally. Okay? James saying you won't get a first for Kelly. You might get a first for Kelly. Depends on what else is coming back in that deal. I mean, if you take on more salary, the Raptors have a lot of unique things they can do. The Raptors can trade. So first of all, just a very, very brief overview of what the Raptors can do. The Raptors have close to $10 million in luxury tax room. They can spend up to the luxury tax line with no real impunity or implications, right? With no real consequence for doing that, which means they can take their mid-level exception, which they did not use, and trade it as an exception. Now, they often don't trade exceptions, but I think they held on to this mid-level exception precisely to be able to do something like this. They can maneuver that, provided they are financially compensated for it, right? So, additionally, they can also, because they're pretty far away from the salary floor, they can also do the same thing for another team, which means that if a team desperately wants Davion Mitchell or Chris Boucher, and all they have to trade for it, they don't really want to trade they don't want to trade an actual player. Well, they can also take back another team's mid-level, if I'm not mistaken, right? I'm pretty sure they can do that. I have to read the CBA again. There's also the additional thing of they can take back more money in trades because they're so far away from the luxury tax line and some teams are capped out. I think the Raptors are playing musical chairs. I think the Raptors are looking around at the league, and there's a lot of teams that have severely mismanaged, right? Severely mismanaged. There's this old quote, which I have repeated several times, and I'm going to repeat it one more time. Daryl Morey said, the best time to operate or work in this league is when many teams, ideally 6 to 7 teams, don't know what they're doing. The problem is, for the last few years, it almost felt like almost every team knew what they were doing, with a few rare exceptions who pretty much depleted all their assets. Right now, with the new CBA and this apron structure, it strikes me that at least 6 to 7 teams really, really, really mistimed this, and they have no real way out of it. And the Suns are one of those teams, and they're just digging themselves further in the hole, trading away that 2031 pick to get 3 picks so they can trade it now. Danny Ainge just capitalized on that. That's a bigger asset. So what the Raptors can do right now is the same thing that financially successful people do during a recession. Do you know what successful, smart investors do during a recession? They buy. They buy everything they can because other people are panicking. And there's this old quote, when there's blood on the streets, buy property, right? What does it mean? What does it mean? It means that there's a flood coming, man. I'm gonna chain this back to something that just ties back to life. Okay, this is the mountaintop. Okay, this is your Elon Musk's and your Mark Zuckerberg's, and the flood is never going to come for them. They'll be off this planet before the flood comes for them. This are your tech millionaires and all those AI people and people who invested in Bitcoin and people who have like 18 cars. This is probably your doctors and your lawyers and whatever. Somewhere around the middle, you probably have your middle class workers and those people, right? Then you get a little bit lower, a little bit lower, a little bit lower. You end up with people with have no assets, and you end up even lower than that. You have people who have significant debt, maybe student debt for years and years, medical debt, etc. People who live in, extremely bad conditions across the world. My point is, every recession is like a flood. It comes till here and it wipes out everybody. Think about it as like a mountain. You're living on the mountain and the flood comes. Some floods, they come up to here. Some come up to here. Some come up to here. The point of the financial markets and how it works is the people at the top are looking from the top, and wherever the flood line is, they just come down, and all those empty houses, they scoop them up. What do you think happened during the mortgage crisis when people were gifting their homes away for, pennies on the dollar, leaving their homes with big abandoned signs? The bank took them back and then did what? Sold them back to wealthy people who could now own 100 homes, 200 homes, 500 homes. The Raptors have an opportunity to be loan sharks here. The Raptors have the opportunity to be bottom feeders and, frankly, very opportunistic hunters here. The Raptors are operating in a league in which the vast majority of the league is hamstrung without draft capital and with a lot of long-term assets. And then there are teams, let's call them the haves, like the OKC Thunder, that have the ultimate flexibility, the ultimate success, the ultimate asset base. And teams like that are super set up. Teams like the Brooklyn Nets are very well set up. Teams like, sorry to say, the New York Knicks. Yeah, sure, they're having some modicum of success right now. The Minnesota Timberwolves are having some modicum of success right now. You may even look at those teams and envy them, but wait until you see the flood that comes for them. At which point, I think the Raptors specifically want to pile up these draft assets because it's when these teams get super duper desperate that they have to make moves that they don't want to make. A move like trading Devin Booker 2 years from now, if you're the Phoenix Suns. When Kevin Durant retires and you have no draft picks for the next 7 years, Devin Booker's going to want out. Moves like piling up assets to maybe trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo when he eventually is done with Milwaukee. Moves like maybe being able to trade for a Jalen Williams because the OKC Thunder can't afford to pay him. You want to be in a position where you are at the top of the mountain and not at the bottom. And being able to successfully maneuver players like Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, Jakob Poeltl, Davion Mitchell, even some of your rookies into successful assets, whether those be traded for draft picks, whether they become developed into actually good assets. RJ Barrett plus Emmanuel Quickley at one point fetched the New York Knicks OG Anunoby. The question you need to ask if you're a Raptor fan is, if they develop under Darko Rajakovic a year from now, if they went for OG Anunoby before they developed, when one of them was considered a toxic asset and the other one was considered a bench scoring guard, what if when the Raptors are successful in a 46-win team and RJ is starting and Quickley is starting, what will they be worth then? Will they potentially become, alongside a whole bunch of draft capital, the type of asset base that could get you a Chet Holmgren? Okay, that's crazy. Probably not Chet Holmgren. Could they be the type of assets that get you a franchise cornerstone type instead of just an OG Anunoby? No disrespect to OG. You get what I'm saying? There are teams that are going to be in very, very dire straits very soon. Okay. Teams like the Indiana Pacers have locked themselves into a very expensive, very low upside core. Okay. Teams like the Orlando Magic, maybe they will escape because their young upside core actually looks like they're good. If Cade Cunningham wins, gets on a first team All NBA, third team All NBA, he's in line for a supermax. Supermax. If Jabari Smith Jr. is extended by the Houston Rockets, they are going to have a lot of money owed to those players. When these players start to get expensive, suddenly you end up with the Patrick Williams of the world, where there's buyer's remorse almost immediately. There's buyer's remorse, right? Capital gains, chiming in again. OKC finished with 20 wins in 2019 and 2020. Now they're at the top. Do they have a loser mentality still? Good organizations know how to tank and develop in parallel. Bro, OKC's success is due to the ineptitude of several other teams and their willingness to capitalize on that. So, kudos, Sam Presti. It is their development and their investment in infrastructure, which is coaches, development coaches. Their G League squad is amazing. It's their scouting department. It's Chip England. It is also a very intelligent trade, capitalizing on the desperation of the Clippers to bring in their franchise player. What do you think you'd be talking about OKC if they didn't have Shea right now? Come on now. Chet Holmgren is the one top 10 pick. Okay. He's the one top 10 pick. Cason Wallace, I think, was 11th. Was he 11th, 10th, 12th, something like that? Jalen Williams was 12th. Shea was 11th. They traded for him. They didn't become this good by tanking. It's a really silly premise. Because winning does not happen overnight. You'd be foolish to think that the Wizards are going to go from bottom feeders. I mean, do you remember the list that I showed you of all those bottom feeders and who they got? RJ Barrett. Did RJ Barrett bring winning to New York? I mean, granted, they won more with him than without him, but I think a lot of that had to do with the other players around him. I don't think he himself had contributed a single win share. When the Knicks had traded for him, RJ Barrett was a negative everything. Analytically, I don't think he registered a single win share for the Knicks at all. So all that losing got you more losing. James Wiseman, same thing. All of those players that I mentioned, all they did was lose more until winners came in and took over the show. You think Jalen Green and Jabari Smith are the ones leading to winning in Houston? No, it's Ime Udoka, Dylan Brooks, Fred VanVleet, players that, by the way, were available to the Raptors if they wanted them. A coach that was probably available to the Raptors if their media wasn't so liberal. So that's what I'm trying to say is winning is done through different ways, right? It's not just through top 5 picks. It's through smart trades. It's through wins on the margin. It's through hitting on your second round picks. You want to talk about OKC tanking? You're not talking about Isaiah Joe, undrafted. You're not talking about Lou Dort, undrafted. You're not talking about Alex Caruso, smart trade. You're not talking about that. Mitsu saying, are you going to PC Weekend, Penn? No, unfortunately, I can't go to PC Weekend because of the Pendance Film Festival. Pendance Film Festival is coming up February 27th to March 2nd. Going to be some fantastic films, over 65 films at Pendance this year. Can't wait. Link in the description for a pass if you haven't gotten it. Tickets will go on sale this week, this coming week. The full schedule and most of the schedule will be announced this weekend. We've been a little bit late announcing it, but Pendance is about 34 days away. I'm excited. I'm really excited. This is fun. D-Car Music. RJ Barrett was very instrumental in the Knicks playoff run in 2022. I agree. He was good for them. Absolutely. I'm talking regular season. Wiseman was picked in the COVID draft, so not much scouting that year. James Wiseman was widely considered one of the 5 best players in high school basketball prior to going to Memphis. So while, yes, it's possible that had he played more games, there's a chance. Again, it was the same year the Raptors drafted Malachi Flynn. So again, like there's definitely something there to that. But the Raptors just missed their entire draft eval on that entire draft. I mean, if you look at the players that they've targeted through that draft, I believe it's Emmanuel Quickley they targeted also, and they've also targeted Precious Achua. Results are mixed on all of those. So yeah. People always use the Hornets and Wizards as reasons that tanking doesn't work, not that they've had incompetent management forever. Unfortunately, if you are of the mind that tanking is the only way, you're not going to be moved off, and nothing I'm really going to say to you is going to change your mind. If you walked in saying tanking is horrible, nothing I've said has, moved you off that position. Unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at in this world and on the internet, where you go into a video, you hear what you want to hear, you think what you want to think, and then you come out thinking the exact same thing. I dare you to challenge your convictions and just look at the math of tanking and just realize that because of how the odds makers have restructured this, I need you to look at the outcomes of the teams that have actually done what you have done. I want you to think of it just like anything else. If I told you that if let's just say you had a grad program that you really wanted to get into on the basis that you think that this grad program is going to get you into the field or the job that you want and get you hundreds of thousands of dollars of salary, and I showed you data that suggested that 45% of all graduates from this graduate program do not actually get a job in that field, and that the ones who do earn $80,000 a year on average. Are you suddenly moved off of your theory that this grad program is going to get you hundreds of thousands of dollars? If you're not, it's because you don't understand the information being presented to you and you don't have a overly critical mind to reinterpret data and information in a new and meaningful way. That may be a very condescending way of just saying you're stupid, but that's kind of what I'm saying. You need to adjust to the information. The truth is that all of us have kind of grown up with this rhetoric of be bad to be good, be bad to be good. But when the numbers change, your approach has to change too. All factors must be considered. When the Toronto Raptors traded Pascal Siakam, what did they say? Well, we don't want this many draft picks. We don't want this many draft picks in the same draft. And then, I think it was when they traded for OG that they said that. And then what happened? No. It was when they traded for Pascal, and they said you don't necessarily want 4 draft picks in the same draft class, right? And what did they do? They took 5 players in that draft class. Why? Because the information changed, the players changed, the players who were available changed. If Ulrich Shamshay goes 55th, they're not trading for the 57th pick. If Jonathan Mobo goes 29th, maybe they deal that 31st pick. Maybe they move down. If Jamal Shed goes first round, maybe they're not even drafting any of these players. Maybe they're drafting Ulrich at 45. My point is, your evaluation has to be like, you can't go in with the rhetoric and then try to get the pieces to fit your rhetoric, which is what I think people are doing right now with Zachary Risache and Alex Sarr. They're saying, oh, these guys are top 2 picks. They're not playing like top 2 picks. Yeah, don't hold your breath. They're never going to play like top 2 picks, right? They're not. It's just not going to happen because every draft is different and every draft has different spikes and different strengths. And every single team that picks in the draft has to be matched up with those players. And so if you're the only team that values a certain type of prospect in the top 10, then the odds of that player slipping down to you at 7, 8, 9 actually go up. But if the team that has number 1, 3, and 5 have the exact same philosophy on the draft, same scouting philosophy, same team needs, same roster construction, same overall, basketball type that they want to be playing, and you're picking 7th, you're fucked because they're going to pick 3 players that you definitely have on your board. Every year, the Toronto Raptors get a player at a spot where they would have picked them much higher. I'll guarantee you Grady was not 13th on their board. I'll guarantee you Scotty was not 4th on their board. I will guarantee you that Ulrich was not 57th on their board, that Jamal Shed was not 45th on their board. The question you need to ask is not where a player is drafted. The question is, where would you have drafted him? That's the value to you. Because let me tell you something. If you think that Grady Dick is the 3rd best player in the 2023 draft, and you got him at 13th, then I got news for you. You got a 3rd pick that you're paying as a 13th pick, which is much better than a 3rd pick being paid like a 3rd pick. Now, I'm not saying the Raptors would have picked Grady Dick at number 3. I know that's not true. But I'm saying, let's just say that the year that the Raptors were desperately trying to trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo, who was the 15th pick, and they were trying to get 12, 13, 14. Okay, let's say they picked him at 12. But let's say an image leaks in which the Raptors had Giannis 4th on their board that year. Well, what is Giannis really? Giannis is really the 4th pick, right? So if you understand implicitly that every team around you is not going to value Kaman Malawach the way you're going to value him, and that you would pick him as high as 2, and you don't know a single other team that's going to pick him before 6. Well, I mean, if you know that for sure, I'm not saying there's ever a sure, but if you can say that with 80% certainty that Kaman is number 2 on your board, that you would pick him over Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. Let's just say that's true. Let's just say, entertain me for a second. Let's say the Raptors have a divergent way of thinking about this, and Kaman Malawach is literally 3rd on their board. I'm not going to put him over Cooper, and I'm not going to put him over Dylan because I'm not stupid. But let's just say Kaman is literally 3rd on the Raptors board. They love him. They know things about him that other people don't. They know his trainer. They know his family. They know everything about this dude. Let's just say Kaman is the 3rd player on the Raptors board, and they know for a fact through Kaman's people, through agents, through the whispers, that nobody else has Kaman number 5. Now, why do you care that you're number 6? You're going to pay the 3rd pick as a 6th pick. Less pressure on him, less money for you. Boom. That's a win. It depends on how you think about the draft. And there's no way to control getting the 6th pick either. The only way to get to ensure. So now, if you view Kaman as like the ceiling for him as a pick is 6th, but you have him as a 3rd prospect, well, then really, how do you ensure getting him? Bottom 2. But you know another way to sustainably like have a really good chance of Kaman? Being 5th. The team that's 5th has a realistic floor that is almost on par with the team that's 2nd. They're both realistically going to pick around 6 and 7. That's their floor. It's just the upside. You can't control the upside. I'm trying to say this from a mathematical perspective. Tanking doesn't work. From a mathematical perspective, from a philosophical, romanticized movie, Hallmark fucking channel perspective, yes, tanking works because it pacifies losing teams, fan bases, into thinking that losing creates winning. Losing does not create winning. Process creates winning. Good habits create winning. And unfortunately, good habits sometimes result in winning sooner than you might expect. So I'm not rooting against wins or losses this year. That was my promise coming into this year. I'm going to stick to that promise, even though I have some internal conflicts and thoughts about, well, I hope we don't win too much. I understand that winning is important for this team. And I think that winning is important largely because I think that it massively amplifies the assets that you're holding and trying to trade. I'll talk to y'all later. 1 hour, 5 minutes. Probably said in an hour and 5 minutes what I could have said in 35, but I decided to ramble off and off and off because there were so many people here. But yeah, if you want to hear more of my voice, I'm going to be on playback tonight covering the Cavaliers versus the Sixers. So if you want to just hear me talk shit about Nick Nurse for an hour and a half, probably that's what I'm going to do. I will be on playback, player's choice, playback. So Jaden saying 905 play tonight, question mark. I don't know the 905 schedule offhand, but if they are playing, you can be sure I'll have one eye to that 905 game as well. All right. And maybe I'll do a post game for the 905, but I got a lot of work to do with Pen Dance right now. But I'll talk to y'all later. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Make sure to give this video a like and let me know in the comments, what do you think of the Toronto Raptors tank right now? And also big shout outs to At the Buzzer Sports. They did a mock draft in which the Raptors got the first overall pick. And John D made a really, really funny point saying that, you know, he said, shout outs to my friend, Pensare Basketball. He's going to be unsufferable if the Raptors get Cooper Flagg. Oh, you have no idea how unsufferable I'm going to be if the Raptors get Cooper Flagg. Oh my God, I will not shut up. I will probably make 18 to 19 videos covering every angle of this player from what he eats for breakfast to how that means he's going to be one of the greatest players of all time. Honestly, I'll be very excited to get Cooper Flagg. I'll be very excited to get Dylan Harper. I understand your frustration and your enthusiasm. I understand all of it. What I'm trying to tell you is last year you got a player that I probably think is a top 25 to 30 pick in this draft at 57. You got a player that I probably would, in hindsight now, take in the lottery at 19. So who am I to say you can't get a top 3 pick at 7 or 8 this year? Who am I to say? All right. Malawach is around the 10 spot and not the target. Who knows? Maybe he is the target. I think he fits in beautifully with what the Raptors want to do. His analytics are jumping off the page to me. I really like Come On a lot. All right. Talk to y'all later. Have a great one. Bye-bye.